I heard someone say just a few days ago, I'm not sure Memorial Day means what it once did. Wasn't really sure what he meant when he first said that. But then after talking to him further, then I began to realize where he was going with that. See, for many, Memorial Day is just a Monday holiday. For many, it's an extended weekend. It is a time of vacation. It does mark the beginning of summer officially. It is the weekend of the Indianapolis 500. School is now officially out. Swimming pools will be officially open this weekend. And as a footnote to that, if they can find the lifeguards, and I know many are looking for those right now. See, it is a time where we have many picnics, we have celebrations, cookouts, barbecue, may even have some outings out on the lake. But Memorial Day is a whole lot more than that. It is a time when we memorialize, we remember those that have sacrificed in so many ways, and not just the soldiers themselves, but others that have sacrificed, their families. Sometimes we forget the sacrifices that they have made, all for the sake of freedom and for the betterment of our country. Memorial Day really grew out of the human need to remember where we have been. Remember where we have been. I like looking at my life and seeing where I have been and where I am right now. When I think about where we have been as a country and where we are right now, when I think about where we have been, it gives me a little bit more guidance as to where we're going. See, forgetting where we came from, forgetting to remember where we once were, and telling those stories is a lot like dropping the torch. We've got to continue on. We've got to carry on where we were as a nation, telling those stories and perpetuating those in our minds and in our history. See, I believe this is what was on the mind of President Abraham Lincoln. On November the 19th, 1863, as he made his way to that Pennsylvania battlefield, he feared that he may very well be the last president of the United States. This country was teetering on the blink of self-destruction. That ceremony that afternoon would commemorate the site of a cemetery where over 4,000 soldiers were killed in Gettysburg in a 3-day battle the previous July. July the 1st, July the 2nd, July the 3rd, in Gettysburg, 1863. Abraham Lincoln's remarks provided, I believe, the seedbed for what we now know as Memorial Day. I grew up at a time, and probably most of you all did, when you remember it was called Decorations Day. And I can remember over the years decorating many of graves on Memorial Day weekend. Graves of people that were soldiers, people that we've come to know and love. And now we have carried that a little further, and it's not just to commemorate our soldiers, but our loved ones that have died. It's a way of remembering them. It's a way of remembering their impact upon our lives. But you might well remember that Abraham Lincoln started that speech with these words, 77 years ago. What was he making reference to? 77 years ago. He was making reference to something that took place 87 years before at the writing of the Declaration of Independence. Our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now, in less than 2 minutes later, he concluded his remarks by saying, "The world will take little note or will not remember very long what we say here today in this Gettysburg Address," although he was wrong about that. "But it could never forget what they, meaning the sacrifices of our soldiers, have done." That whole speech was only 271 words long. And the impact that the Gettysburg Address has had upon history. Some of you may be wondering, such a speech having such an impact, why can't I preach a sermon that's just 271 words long and have the same kind of impact? Maybe one of these days, but today is not one of them, okay? All right? I want us to look at 2 reasons why I believe it's important that we celebrate Memorial Day. Sadly enough, I have known people that would not be engaged or involved in any way in any kind of military celebrations. Karen and I have a close friend that would never participate in anything like that. His idea and his understanding would be totally different than what I think most of us would believe. I believe one of the most important things we need to do is to reflect upon the awful cost of war and the fact that freedom is costly. We take so much of our freedoms for granted. You know, we worship right here today. It's a freedom that we have. And we have the freedom of speech. I make reference to this a lot when I think about this. You know, when I was in Iran, what was that, 11, 12 years ago? I did not have the freedom to worship. I had to be careful everything I said. Couldn't even mention the word God, Jesus Christ, missionary. They call that the M word. You can't use the M word. And you certainly couldn't use Jesus Christ or God. All because I didn't have the freedom to talk about that. They didn't have the freedoms. Many have gone off to war, and they've come back. And they've come back to live out their potential and to live out their dreams. But what about those that didn't make it back? What about those that had so much potential? What about those that were not able to fulfill their dreams? What were their potentials? I believe there were potential doctors and physicians, lawyers, businessmen, farmers, political leaders, people that could have invented things, but their life was cut short. When I think of all the wars in America's history, I think about how so many people have been robbed of their dreams, robbed of all the potential. Now, we remember this day not only for those that have paid the ultimate price in battle, but also for those that have been touched by the rippling effect of war. And I might make that plural, the rippling effects. I think about families. I think about spouses. I think about children whose lives have been gravely affected, maybe positively, but certainly a lot in a negative way. I would refer to them as the other victims of war. We forget about that. But you hear enough stories from enough veterans and enough families of veterans, you'll realize that they too made sacrifices. And some of them continue to make sacrifices. I love taking a pebble, taking it and tossing it in a pond. Haven't done that in a long time. But I like looking at the ripple effects of that rock or that pebble and how the ripple effects have a way of widening and widening and widening until it gets to the outer bank. Life is like that. And we can have good, positive ripple effects. But war is also like that. It can have the rippling effects upon the lives of so many. But we also gather here together today to recommit our walk and our pledge, our allegiance, our gratefulness, our gratitude for those that have paid so much, some of which means the ultimate price. See, I hope that we can walk away this weekend resolving in our hearts and minds that we are going to remember. And we're going to remember what Memorial Day is. Not just a time of getting together and playing games and softball and racquetball and cooking and all those good things. May we also be reminded of the cruelty of war. In 1945, General Douglas MacArthur stood on the deck of the battleship USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay after receiving the formal surrender from the Japanese government, officially signing the documents, meaning that the war was over. I believe that was September the 2nd. I know it was 1945. But this was one of his quotes. "It is my earnest hope, and indeed the hope of all mankind, that from this solemn occasion a better world shall emerge out of the blood and the carnage of the past." He went on to say, "A world founded upon faith and understanding, a world dedicated to the dignity of man and the fulfillment of his most cherished wish of freedom." It is only as we read letters and diaries of those that have fought that we can begin to really grasp the message of war. This was written by a Louisiana soldier writing to his wife during the Civil War. "Oh, how I long to be home with you, and I would forfeit all that I have in this world if I could just be let loose from all of this." A Union physician wrote, "How can I long, oh, how I long for this war to be over, so that I can go quietly back to my profession as a doctor, curing and healing people and not killing people." Another one said, "You have no conception of the amount of suffering here. It is a horrible sight." So as we gather here this weekend, I hope that we can remember those who have paid the ultimate sacrifices for our nation. Some were instilled with the sense of patriotism. They were instilled with the sense of duty. But then there's others that did not have those high ideals. Many of them have, and some even today, find themselves in faraway places. Places where they did not want to be, doing what they did not want to have to do, fighting a war that they did not completely understand. I want to challenge you today to thank a veteran. If they're here today, as we dismiss, I hope you will thank them. Thank them for their time. Thank them for their service. Thank them for the sacrifices that they have made. Let's thank all of those brave Americans. And it might do us all well to make a phone call. My intention today is to call Colton in California today, thanking him for where he is and his sacrifice and his desire to do what he is doing. There have been many that we've come to know and love and appreciate that have paid the ultimate sacrifice. I've got a lot of stories I could tell. This is one of the saddest of all the funerals I've ever done. And I have shown a picture of them in the past. I think on our new computer it's not there. But I can remember on December the 17th, I think it was 2003, performing the wedding at Bank Lick Baptist Church in North Kentucky of a beautiful couple. She was from this area. Her dad grew up right here at Mount Hebron Baptist Church, actually. And then the following July, they got that dreaded phone call. Actually, they knew when somebody in a military automobile came knocking on their door, something was wrong. And I remember about 10 days later, they brought his body back in a flag-draped coffin. I remember that visitation being up at the National Guard Armory there in Walton and having that funeral the next morning. I remember in that funeral driving my own vehicle, and I'm glad it wasn't with that funeral director that day. But the burial was in Independence, Kentucky, at Independence Cemetery. And what really got to me more than anything else was in that procession, seeing kids standing there. They must have known our route. Kids saluting that funeral coach as it came by. Men and women waving flags. It just showed their patriotism and their love for our country. And it was their way of saying, thank you, John Boyd Williams, for all that you've given, even the ultimate price. Let's not forget. Let's not forget where we have come from, so that we might know a little bit better where we're going. We are a grateful nation. Let's continue to be a grateful nation. Let's pray.